Welcome, Tiny Hands Big Dreams, here on our off-grid homestead in southern Ecuador. This is an easy one. This is exactly what you need to do to homestead. I can't even say that with a straight face. Other people do. Other people say it.
Yeah.
They tell you, this is what you need. You need this thing and this thing and this. I don't,
And a lot of it is honestly unattainable for most people. And if you were going to wait to obtain said things or experiences, you're going to wait way too long.
In our opinion. Look, it's a roll your own kind of thing, choose your own adventure.
Roll your own.
It's a phrase. It's a phrase. I've heard it somewhere in the past. It is what you make of it. Now, there's a bunch of examples. We're going to go through a whole bunch of examples. There's a whole bunch of videos out there like, you need these things. You need a tractor and a barn and a thing and 40 acres of flat land. And
So a lot of it comes from there's a push to homestead, which is great. We approve. We think it's awesome. More people should grow and raise their food, be in touch with it, be more self-sufficient. We are all for it. We are not necessarily for doing things the way everyone else does, or doing things the way that you are told you should do it. And I guess that goes for us too.
You shouldn't be either.
So
don't think, oh, well, they're happy, I'll do what they do.
You probably most likely wouldn't be happy.
Yeah, sometimes even they're not happy, but they won't tell you that right away because they're making happy videos that are Instagram worthy, and then 5 years from now they're like, yeah, we're quitting.
Well, and even if you're watching us, like, are we happy with what we're doing? Yes. But you shouldn't necessarily try to emulate anyone, including us.
Unless it works for you.
But you shouldn't emulate. You should look at and judge and consider what parts of people's lives might work for you.
This all came from somewhere. This idea, this concept. Yeah. I'll let you do that.
What?
Where this came from.
Oh, I was just watching videos. And by watching, I mean listening. I have no time to watch videos, but I'll listen to them. Hopefully that's what other people do with ours, because
her entire kitchen time is spent with the headphones on, grinding meat, doing stuff, doing dishes, and she's just
listening to whatever. So listening to some homesteading videos, and a lot of them have been like, oh, if you're going to homestead, you shouldn't do this, or you should do this, or you have to have these things to start, or don't quit your job and homestead, or all of these things. And it just sort of struck me. I was like, really? Like, I don't agree with most of these lists. Now, some things I do. Some things I think are very important, things we've already touched on. But I was really struck by how much people thought you needed to have to even start.
Yeah.
So,
historically, homesteading, the Homestead Act, the thing from which the word derives. Let's go back. That's
we're
old
big
school.
On word definitions.
Word definition. The Homestead Act of...
Ooh, I want to say 1862, and I don't know where that came from. It might be right. I have no idea.
To go and to be given a piece of land, you will walk, you will wagon your horse to it. There is nothing there that nature didn't provide, except whatever you make. That was...
what it was you had to... It was a government program that you had to go... you could go and homestead a piece of land for free. And if you could prove within a certain amount of years that you could make it...
a certain percentage of it cultivated?
Yeah, basically you could make it developed as a farm.
Yeah.
You could have that property for free.
I was told that was the story of Johnny Appleseed. Was actually not so much the one I was told as a child, but that he would go and simply put apple seeds out on pieces of land, which therefore then made apple trees, which then therefore like...
Oh, interesting. So should I go into it?
Yes.
The points. So different people have said this. I am not going to call out any particular YouTubers. A lot of them cross. A lot of people say the same things.
You may know them, you may not. Don't call them out in the comments either.
It's not a negative on them.
It's
their opinion.
We don't want to start...
Well, it's their opinion, and that's fine. We just have a different opinion we would like to throw into the mix.
Sometimes people get upset, though, if you disagree with their opinion. They're just fragile that way, and then it starts like a whole like flame war.
Which I don't mind if people disagree with us politely.
No,
Politely.
politely, with constructive criticism. No, we're great with that. Like, please be different.
Disagree all you want.
Yeah.
So, point 1: assess and plan your property. On face value, I agree. The details of that description were to wait. Most people say to wait 6 months, a year, and watch your property, which I have issues with. And this particular creator said to hire a permaculture designer. Now, I am not necessarily, I can't say that's a terrible idea. It might be a good idea. But to say you need to do that, I think is, man, that just did. If I wanted, like if I was dreaming of homesteading and I watched that video and I took that to heart, I would probably give up, because
if you're the kind of person that wants to go and buy a house that somebody else designed for what they thought was cool, and you just move in and it's all done because it was designed by a professional designer, that may suit you. However, permaculture, like engineers, are a pretty varied bunch.
And that's not...
They're all over the map with how they're going to design it. It's not like there's a permaculture standard. And then your property is the biggest...
Well, and that's the whole point, is they design it for your property, which might have value. But even if it has value, at what cost?
Now, I could see hiring one as a consultant to like, hey, give me a bunch of ideas of like what could be done. And they're like, oh, well, you could use this land this way or that. And to just like,
I suppose,
hand you a bucket of good ideas. And, oh, you could put your compost here, this, that, for these certain reasons. Use this for like water. And be like, oh, things you didn't think about.
And that might have value, but I think so much of permaculture, and maybe people don't talk about this enough, so much of permaculture also has to do with who you are. Like, what are your routines? What makes sense for you? Because permaculture is supposed to also work for you, not make your life harder. And so is someone gonna put the compost somewhere where you're like, yeah, but like that doesn't work for me to go there? You know what I mean?
Sure. Or like, oh, here's my horse pasture. I don't like horses.
There's some of that. I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea, but I think it's unattainable for most people starting out on a homestead.
Sure. And it may not even be not all.
Just because you're a professional doesn't mean you're good. I'm sorry.
There's a lot of...
No matter what field, industry,
man, I know a lot of useless people with masters and PhDs. And sometimes they have like decent core knowledge in one subject, but they're not like an intelligent, creative person outside of that. They're not going to push their field in like a new direction, and they don't know any other field. So they can sort of do what they do in a reasonable way, in a non-exemplary kind of fashion.
But also, this is your homestead. And maybe this is just a personal value or ideal, but I want to design our homestead. I want to choose those things for us.
Now, sometimes it's, here's the path that we walk to get there, and that is the path we have chosen, and you go out and you start chipping away, and you put rock, and you're like,
path.
Now there is a path, and there's great satisfaction in that.
Well, there's also...
Nobody could have designed that.
No one would design that. Someone would design... If I did this when I first started building paths, is I would have done it this way that was ideal in my brain, that was aesthetic and made sense, but my family doesn't walk that way. And so you cut a corner, I'd be like, I'm just going to make the path the way that we go. A designer wouldn't do that.
And being extra protective because she was stung by something for no reason while up the hill. There's a huge, gnarly, like, bullseye on her back.
It hurts pretty good.
Whoa. Yeah. So I'm...
Thanks.
We don't know why. Literally, like, there'll be a wasp and it'll just be like, I gotta get you. It's just her.
Oh, it's just me. Thanks. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on the hire a professional. And as far as the waiting, yes. If you could wait a year, or depending on what the climate does, 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, because it will change, and see, the way the water flows and how things change, and if you're in a 4-season climate, the snow and what problems and things. Sure. I don't want to ever wait a year
you
to
could do that
anything.
and find out that every 7 years, that beautiful pasture floods out and you lose a year to hydric soil.
There's a lot of things, and I just don't think that waiting is necessarily a reasonable thing to do.
You look at it,
yes.
You assess it, you make your best guess, you go with it. Don't the time that you lose just waiting. Like, what are you doing
sometimes
there?
you have to change things, but you're gonna have to change things forever. There is no static finished homestead that never changes.
No,
it always changes. Okay. Secure your water sources. This is really easy. We both totally agree on this, right?
Yeah.
Whatever they are. Now, I don't agree with using certain things. I think that, you do what you can. I think that finding a natural water source is your best option. But if you have city water, you have city water. It's not the best. I don't agree that it is a good choice, but if it is the only choice you have because of regulations or, I don't know, anything.
Have it tested. Spend the little bit of money that it costs to have it officially full tested, chemicals, things. Oh, there's like fluoropolymers in it. There's things. There's dioxins. There's what? There's runoff from residue. There's lead. Actually, it was in the Thousand Trails in Bow, and because I was on maintenance, the guy gets the water report, which they have to do a yearly water report. Well, they have a big well, and they pump it up and they store it in a big open tower, which it turns out nobody was ever allowed to go and look at. They said for insurance reasons, but it's because the top of the tower is open and birds just poop in it, and that's everybody's water. Sorry, I didn't tell you that.
No, you did. I knew it after the fact.
Anyway, as they run the water report, and the guy's been there for a bunch of years, and he goes, hey, and he asked me, he goes, do you have any reason why, like, the lead is actually starting to, like it's below threshold? But they asked me, like, did you change something? Did you install some plumbing? Do you have lead pipes? And I looked at it, and I thought about it for a second, and I went, hey, on that freeway exit back, not ours, but the one before, if you take that exit and you go down into the gully, there's a shooting club that's been there forever. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. So think of the elevation of, like, where we are, where they are, where our well picks up. You gonna tell me that entire shooting club has a full polymer geo liner that they put in 50 or 60 years ago? No, all that lead is slowly dissolving and it's making it to the aquifer, and it's gonna go up. It's gonna go up forever, and it's just gonna do this. He's like, oh. I'm like, yeah, dude, like there's no way around that one.
So while just secure your water sources is great, it's also the safety and cleanliness of them.
Yeah.
So, water is good.
Water is good. You gotta have water.
Establish a garden.
Establish.
There are details to these. I'm not going to quote everybody exactly.
A garden is not a thing you establish. It's not like you plant a flag in it and I claim this for garden and you
declare it.
Yeah, and I declare this garden and stuff just grows. No, it's like a continual process, and if you stop, it all just sort of gives up and goes away.
So instead of establish a garden, which again, you build your beds, you do
practice garden. You practice every day. You do more. You things. It's like martial arts or something. You just keep doing it, and it gets a little easier every time.
How many times have I torn it out and redone it because it gets slightly better every time.
And every time it gets a little better, bigger. The soil gets better.
So I would say instead of establish garden as this you establish this thing that is productive, because it probably won't be. I would say build soil.
Yeah.
Start with the soil.
Before
you try to plant things. Honestly,
it is.
I'm terrible at because I just want to stick stuff in the ground.
According to a very prominent soil science, one of the fathers of regenerative of farming with compost, has said that if you start in on a place, you're into it for 5 years, like to really get it going. Mm-hmm. Like that's your journey. I would say if it's mediocre soil to start with, 3 years at least.
Yeah.
So know that it's a process. It's a time. You're gonna add. You're gonna think. You're gonna let it kind of self-adjust. Worms take time to grow.
But at the very least, you could start a compost pile. We have a video on it.
We do.
You can start a compost pile. I would say, but if we're talking about like the beginnings, instead of trying to establish a working garden,
yeah,
and have that as some sort of goalpost, because honestly, I think I did the same thing moving here. I'm like, we finally have land again. Just got to put a garden in, and it's not how it has gone.
No, the compost video we did is actually really good. There's the what's his name? It's the something Sue bioreactor. His wife's name was Sue, and his was.
I don't remember.
It's in our video. So basically, it's a big round compost pile. There's tubes in it for aeration. There's a pallet underneath so air can get up through. It requires no energy. You just have to keep it wet. We're using an aerated static pile. And if we had a blower that wasn't a complete and total piece of Chinese garbage crap, Chinese can make good stuff. They can. This isn't that.
It's really bad.
This is what's available locally. I've repaired the thing like 18 times and it continues to fail because it just wasn't put together with the right parts. That being said, aerated extended pile solves a lot of problems and is pretty easy, and I have had it work very well. In 2 months, you have just the whole thing got really hot, composted, turned into black gold, and you're out.
I would absolutely say start compost.
Yeah,
but get your compost going.
But have a compost plan that you're going to do a certain style. And not just throw some stuff in a pile and think it's going to work.
Doesn't really work that well. Infrastructure. Infrastructure is great. We like infrastructure.
Say it again.
Infrastructure.
Oh.
I like infrastructure.
I especially like infrastructure.
Now,
I'll argue for it all day long.
What they're talking about is perhaps not what you're talking about.
Why you got to steal that?
I'm sorry.
Why you got to take my joy?
You need, according to some people, you need to have a barn and a tractor. I'm sorry. Do you have a barn or a tractor? Have you been hiding it? Have you been hiding it?
That is horseshit. Actually, horseshit's more useful than that.
It actually is.
That's just stinking thinking.
That is actually the point that sort of spurred this entire conversation. I was listening to this as I was making dinner, and I stopped. You know, it's real bad if I stop, and I just I backed up the video, and I'm like, you said what?
If it's really good, she asked me, she's like, would you believe? Boring chainsaws.
That's what that is. It's a weird noise. I just was shocked. I'm like, oh, well, you don't think you need it until you have it, and then you realize it's just so important, and you have to have it, and all this. I'm like, I have neither thing.
Look, rainproof storage is good.
That's fine, but barn.
You don't have to have a barn.
Big old barn. You know how expensive a big old barn is? It is so expensive.
Honestly, some poles and a piece of sheet metal, to keep the rain out, it serves 90% of the purpose.
Or a small shed if you need some more contained, creature-proof or something. But a barn is excessive.
We sure enjoy our big steel container.
Sure. But a barn.
Yeah, we've also lived without the tractor.
We've never had a tractor.
Like I said, we borrowed one once to process a pig.
How did we do that?
Grandy.
Oh, yeah. It didn't really make it that much better.
No.
Honestly, But as far as just general life, a tractor, no, for one thing, if you live on perfectly flat farmland that is not muddy, a tractor could be useful. If you live on our property, that literally we could not use a tractor here.
Yeah.
It would have very little purpose. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
It is maintenance. How often are you going to use it?
But also means you have to have at least some semblance of roads to get around.
Well, that's what I mean.
To different places. We don't. I'd have to dig little roads there. And now I've used up a chunk of the property with road.
Yeah. Also, you don't need it.
You don't.
I look at the amount of equipment that some people talk about needing to do anything on a homestead, to butcher an animal, to I don't know, build a garden, to build a house. We don't have much.
I will put in a total good word for our wheelbarrow, which we should do
Sure.
like a review video on of like
Mhm.
5
That is
years
true.
in.
Oh man, we beat that thing near death.
Still goes.
These are little things. When you talk about the things that we have had we remodeled and created an entire homestead. We are now building everything from scratch here. And from scratch, I mean like our hands. We don't have big equipment. I have never butchered an animal with big equipment and a fancy building and all of the perfect stainless steel everything. No. If you watch any of our videos, we're just sort of doing it by hand.
Yeah.
Yes, we have some power tools. We don't have a tractor and, I don't know, a giant sawmill.
I have hand tools. I have a chainsaw. It is like almost the littlest chainsaw
and these
made.
are small little things. They're not these giant, expensive pieces of equipment. I don't think it's necessary.
It's not. So let me go back to the Homesteading Act. Homesteaders were people that went there and did a thing with what they could carry, what they owned, which was minimal, or what was in a wagon, also minimal. And you started with that.
Mm-hmm.
You were lucky to have some iron tools.
And a horse.
Yep. And they did it.
And yes, it will take longer. And yes, it will be more physically laborious.
Yeah. And you may not have all the, I mean, you may not be able to do as much land. I just saw the definition of an acre. And an acre was the amount of how an acre came to be.
Like the history of.
And I think it was the amount of land you could plow with like an oxen, for a season or something. And
there was some, yeah, you're right. I remember seeing that. Some sort of like historical.
And that was like, you could do that with one oxen and one like stand-on plow or something. Yep. I'm like, okay.
So yes, we are hauling compost to the garden, bucket by bucket.
A really good bucket. Don't overlook a really good bucket.
We should do a video on all the little pieces of things that are really critical if you're going to do this without all of that equipment. I watch videos and I'm like, oh, that's nice. You have a giant tractor and you can just scoop the compost and dump it. Oh, that's nice. But that is a huge cost. It is also, you have to have the correct land for that. Yeah. And there's this weird assumption in all of these homesteading videos where everybody has the exact same sort of cookie cutter homestead land. I find that very odd.
Some of the prettiest land isn't flat.
And some of the cheapest land that's left isn't flat.
Yeah. So where we are is mountainy.
Super mountain.
It's really, you know what, at the end of the video, I'm just going to give you a panorama of the view from where we are sitting right now. End of the video.
So I think that might be a little bit of the issue is that these are all these topics are approached from a very cookie cutter place where everybody has this flat piece of land and they want to have the barn and they want to have the garden plot and they want to, and I think that is realistically a very, very small portion of everyone who's homesteading in some way.
Yeah. We have little paths across the mountain that go over to here and to there and to back.
Garden
it is sort of natural and organic, and it will get better and prettier as time goes on and we get it kind of finished. Right now there's like dead trees laying in half the places.
But a tractor wouldn't help us. We would have no real use for it.
I would have used it to dig a massive amount of roads. We would have had roads everywhere.
But we would have had to pay. And it would have, for us here, it is cheaper to hire it than to buy the dang thing.
Yeah.
So for everyday not building the homestead as much as just everyday homestead use, I don't think you need a barn or a tractor. The other infrastructure piece that I disagreed with, shocking, I know, you have to have a perimeter fence on your whole property.
Was that from like a physical need or a legal need?
Physical.
Or a,
you need it, not illegal. These are all just things that someone believes you should start with, and that's my big issue with this. You have to start with these things.
I remember, where was it? Was it Montana or Idaho? And they were talking about historically, people own like huge tracts of land, and they're like, you could just ride your horse out and across and thing, and far and far and far. And he goes, and then Westerners, people from California, started moving in, and the first thing they did, and they buy this big, beautiful property ranch, was put a full fence around it.
Yep.
And it broke up the openness, and you weren't allowed to ride across it. You couldn't like cross your fence thing. And then so once a couple of these patchwork, well, now you can't get from here to there anymore because there's these pointless fences. It's not like they had anything in them really. They just thought they had to have a fence.
So why? I guess I don't understand.
What are you keeping in?
Your livestock. So the idea, I guess, is a secondary fence to wherever your pasture is. I mean, okay. Like I'm not saying it's like the worst idea in the world, but
it wouldn't keep our goats in.
But what he's talking about, this is not like a barbed wire fence. He's talking about the
like cyclone fence.
No, I don't know what it is, but like not the welded, but the other one, the square like.
Like the rebar mesh or the cattle panel.
It's something different, and it's like the really expensive, fancy one. The giant fence to keep everything in and everything out.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
The cost of that is, I actually don't know the cost, but that would be incredibly expensive if you had any amount of space. Even just a few acres. That's expensive. You also have to get that fence to all of your property, which again, also, you have to be able to fence your whole property, which comes back to, is it a cookie cutter little, like, perfectly flat square of land? We could never.
I'll bet you that fence alone
here.
costs more than our entire adventure and moving here.
Probably. Certainly more than the property itself. Which is so silly. It's so silly. Is it something you could eventually do when you have more money and think, sure. But do I think you should start with that? No.
You might decide that you don't like that kind of fence. You don't even want that kind of fence.
Or you don't have animals that you need that fence for. Or there's just so many instances where I'm like, I don't know if you should start with that. That's all. It's the...
Sorry, continue.
It's the upfront costs that get me. And I know that if I was looking at this
barrier
giant list...
to entry.
Barrier to entry, yes.
Let's go here. Oh, no.
God, I'd be so overwhelmed if I actually believed this.
You're like, okay, well, I'm only at like 160,000 of the 400,000 I need to have just to start.
Without the property.
Hey.
So that I guess leads us to what I have heard 1,000 times. And I just sort of chuckle and I'm like, whatever. I don't agree. Pretty much every homesteader that I have watched on the YouTube says, don't just dive in. And here we are, cannonballing in. We have always done that.
We did peek over the edge of the cliff first.
I didn't.
We came here and like...
No. I'm talking about homesteading.
Oh.
So the homestead, you just like dip your toes in. That's the whole metaphor. You just dip your toes in and you like...
And you get that chicken.
Chickens. It's always the chickens. You get like 3 chickens. So my first year of homesteading, I got 3 chickens. I'm like, I've already like butchered pigs and like, yes. When you jump in, you will mess up more. Maybe more. I don't know. You'll mess up. You will learn to do things a different way. There's a bug in my eye. That was rude. So when you jump in, you will potentially make more mistakes.
Sure.
You will also learn more. You're not going to learn anything from getting 3 chickens. I'm sorry. Maybe that's
Look,
not the popular opinion.
If having 3 chickens totally floats your boat, of like, if that satisfies your urge to homestead.
Oh, if that's what you want to do, that's great.
Stop there.
But if you want a full homestead with, you know, your milk cows, your goats, and your sheep, and your giant garden, and your orchard, and your things, and your all the stuff. If you take it slow, like most people advise, you're going to die before you reach your homestead dreams. And that's just the reality. Like, you don't have forever. Life does not.
We've just gone and done things slightly wrong and just be like, you saw pigs on. Let's just get pigs.
It's always the pigs. I did that when we moved here.
Or
too.
the ducks, pigs! Or the things. Just get those.
We didn't have we got pigs here. We didn't have a fence. It's really. Did we make it work? Yeah. Was it perfect? No.
It worked out great.
And I think so. That maybe leads to the larger question of, or the larger topic of, instead of the list of things that you need to have, basically the list of things you have to have or have done.
Yeah.
What about the things that you need to have internally? That makes sense? Your brain.
Sure.
Your perseverance, your determination.
Your mindset.
Your mindset. Not just your mindset, but your mental abilities. And that might not be a kind thing to say. There are people that should not homestead. That's just what it is.
There are people that shouldn't go off grid.
There are people
see the questions on the Facebook of like, I want to off grid. Tell me the answer now. I will buy it.
I'm like, oh no, I'm sorry.
No. Look, if your answer is you just want to pay a different person every month instead of the power company,
you shouldn't go
contract with that person to be 100% of your answer to install a thing to something. Sure.
If you need,
but you're just on a different grid.
If you need to hire people to design your homestead to tell you exactly how to do it, I'm not sure you should do it because
homesteading is self-doing.
It is an incredibly personal thing.
Yes.
It is personal to what animals do you want? What plants do you want to grow? Okay, so we have our.
You're gonna hire people to come and stick their hands in your dirt and plant your plants?
Yeah, usually.
Wait, what?
There are people, but there's also the bug in my eye still. So rude. There's also personal needs in life. We all have needs, but I mean, like, so for instance, I have nerve damage in my right arm. That doesn't stop me. Most people would just. Does it bother me on a regular basis? Yes. Do I have to do things slightly different because of that? Yes. I can't have someone else design my homestead or my house or my life because there are unique needs for me.
Yeah.
And that's true for everyone. So for me, when I shovel weird. And I realized that watching my own video where I'm like, oh, I shovel weird.
Yeah, you
because I have to awkwardly balance.
And she asked, like, you know, like the shovel handle break. She goes, I want it exactly this long. I want it this. I want this handle top. You can't make it different than that, or I can't push on it.
All those weird little things.
Yeah.
And that's a very small example, but
I have to have this fence this high, these aisles this wide. I have to be able to, like, you know, reach this far.
Exactly.
We designed our new house that way. Like, how big do you want the counter? And I said, well, we go up,
so cool.
And I have her stick her arm out, and I take the tape measure, and I like, how far can your little handy reach?
And how far up do you want all things?
That's your counter.
And you can make it exactly suited to you, which, in the end, after all of the labor is done, it will be the easiest house to live in for us. We have lived in many places that were not designed for us.
It will fit like the proverbial glove.
Because everywhere else has not been designed by us for us.
A well-worn-in boot.
It should be exactly the way that we designed it. That doesn't mean we won't make mistakes. But it will be our design for us. Mm-hmm. And that is to me, that is the entire point of homesteading. Is that it is designed for you, by you.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you would just want to live in suburbia or a city where other people have designed a life for you. It's
Well, it's like the little house that she designed, and she just sort of like, I'm like, just draw it up, and like then we'll go from there. I always like to start with something and then modify.
You didn't modify the dang thing.
And she goes, okay, what would you change? And I was like, man, I looked at it and I'm like, nothing. She's like, wait, what? And I'm like, I really like it. Like I can envision myself in a place, in a thing. I can put the world around me. I can have the point of view of sitting in a spot and looking out a window that's not there. Like I'm doing, and I'm sitting, and I'm thinking, and I'm like, man, that's really nice. It does.
It meets all of the needs.
And I think of all the activities, the stuff I want to do, and I'm like,
and that was the point. You get to something, and then you're like, oh, that's like awkward. It's kind of like the paths, where I'm like, no, that's kind of awkward. Okay, we'll change that.
I've never seen that design layout any time in my life anywhere before.
Because it's designed for us.
But for us,
like the table is the absolute center of the kitchen, or the center of the house, because it is the center of our life.
Yeah.
That would never be designed like
and
that.
It's a huge
usually.
Open kitchen, and there's no walls between the two. Yeah. There's like
everything is very intentional for all kinds of reasons.
Yeah. And I can't find any reason to add or subtract any of it.
And the way we're designing our entire property is very similar, where it is going to work for us in the way that we move through the property and interact with it. And that doesn't mean that we're not leaving room for a tractor, because we're not intending to ever have a tractor. We are leaving room for smaller wheeled apparatus.
Wheelbarrow.
Because buckets.
Yeah.
Buckets. So there are middle grounds to this. There are, eventually, you might be able to afford or have the space for or want something more. You might want a perimeter fence eventually. You might want a tractor. You might want a barn. But to say that you have to start with them, I think is such...
You don't have to start with it.
You don't have to start with it.
And that goes, it's even contrary to the other advice of like, do nothing and don't build anything for a period of time.
And then start with all of these fancy things. You could just start with your hands and a shovel. And
then decide that I'm gonna dig over there. Think, I'm gonna build a little something over there. Or I want like a little pagoda to go and sit in.
And that is
traditionally
the way that people built properties, homesteads.
And it just sort of like...
And funny enough, it's how it's done here.
There's also, the school of thought of you're going to design it like Disneyland, where you start out with a clean sheet of paper in a big area, and you put it all out, and you lay out the roads, and you lay out the under infrastructure and the subway tunnels and the things and how the people move, and you do the whole thing, and you lay it all out, and then you even plan in the future expansion, decades in advance. Yes, it works.
It might work.
But does it actually please any one person? Or is it just there to suit a certain commercial purpose?
And homesteads are not
commercial. It should be. Maybe what we're trying to say is it should end up being an expression of you.
Yes.
It is yours.
Homesteads are personal. And they're not a one-size-fits-all. They're not a, you should do this before you do this, or you can only do this, or you should get chickens first. Everybody says you should get chickens first. We don't need to get chickens first.
If you go and look at other homesteads for sale, you'll probably walk around and think some of it is kludgy and wrong and in the wrong spots. And why would you do that? And why would you put this here? Because it's not the way you would do it. But that's how they naturally sort of developed it. And that works for them. Or it doesn't, and they're just kludgy people. But that also happens.
It's true. But I think it should be a choose-your-own adventure. I don't think you should follow other people's designs.
There's great satisfaction in just letting your own energies kind of percolate out and develop it as you see fit.
And I guess my biggest point is...
But understand that you have the freedom, and not a lot of people understand this, you have the freedom to simply do a thing, to change a thing, to... to just like, I don't like that, I'm going to tear it down, take a sledgehammer to it. Like, what?
Yeah, it didn't work. We'll try again. Gosh, we've done that plenty with things.
But it's a mindset. Even going back to like one of my early businesses, and it was giant rock crawling trucks, and we had to buy a special tool to do a thing. I don't know, something on an axle. And so we go, and we didn't have a lot of money, so buying a fancy tool was like a big deal. And I got it, and I used it, and I was like, but it hits the fender, does a thing, and I'm like, no. The first thing I did was cut it in half, and like modify it and change it and make the angle different so it worked for. And my business partner came out and lost his gourd. You don't modify tools, and I'm like,
but it works better.
Why?
If you
and both of us were like total loggerheads. He's like, a tool is a tool is a tool. You can't modify. You just use it the way it is. And I'm like,
but if it's not working, it's not working.
I changed it to suit the purpose. Now it works perfectly. It doesn't hit anything. It takes it off and things. And he couldn't. And we were in the business for modifying vehicles. Like,
and those are two completely different mentalities. And they probably apply to everything. We are the kind of people who will modify and change and problem solve. And I think that's important in homesteading. I really do. There are people who don't, and they just follow perfectly designed, I don't know, garden plans and things. And it works fine. But I think that it only works in very specific properties and situations and things. We could never apply that here. We could never apply most things here. I guess I just really want to encourage people that if you want to homestead and you have your hands, or a hand, you have at least one hand, you can do it. You can start. There's nothing stopping you. You don't need all of the fancy equipment. You don't need $1 million. You really don't. And that's pretty much my
if you have a shovel and a bucket in a hand,
2 is good.
Yeah. You don't even need a house.
No, we don't have a house.
We were looking at properties that didn't have, like, we're just...
anything.
We'll start with raw land. We'll build it as we go.
That's mostly what we're doing.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy. And yes, it's taking longer, as people have so kindly pointed out that our house is taking so long to build. Hands. That's it.
They're just little hands.
There's just little hands, and some shovels, and some power tools, and some trees. But we're doing it. So it is doable. And that's kind of the point, is it's all doable.
It's doable.
Without the fancy equipment.
All right.
It doesn't mean we don't want the fancy equipment. Okay? We're not anti-fancy equipment.
Some of it is like...
Sometimes.
Look, I don't want a $250,000 combine to go and like harvest like
occasionally
300 acres of corn. To like, at some point you're like, well, why are you here? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, yes, it's bigger. I don't know. Okay, well, I think that's it. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't. There will be more occasional randomness discussions and things in the future, as always. See you for the next one. All right, I said I'd do it. Here is our panorama. And we come down here to the end of the house. There's a valley that runs off that way. And there's a bowl. Then we're down here. You can hear the birds off in the distance making their weird noises. Yep. No tractor. No flatland for us.